The loud clatter of a falling tray echoed through the busy café as Bella Mitchell scrambled to retrieve her scattered belongings from the floor. Her wallet had fallen open, revealing exactly three $1 bills and a collection of loose change not nearly enough to replace the lunch she had just lost. Daniel Drake had been watching the scene unfold from his corner table, his coffee untouched as he observed the young woman's distress. Despite owning half the buildings in the financial district, including the very café they were in, he rarely interacted with the everyday people who populated his properties. Today, something about the woman's quiet dignity as she knelt on the floor made him pause his morning routine. "Please let me help you with that," Daniel said, reaching her side in 3 long strides. At 35, his tall frame and confident bearing commanded attention, though he tried to soften his approach. Bella looked up, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face. "Thank you, but I've got it," she replied, the pink in her cheeks deepening as she realized everyone in the café was watching. "At least let me buy you a replacement lunch," Daniel offered, helping her collect the last of her belongings. Bella hesitated, pride warring with hunger. "I couldn't possibly, I insist," Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm. "Everyone drops things sometimes." She finally nodded, offering a small smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you, that's very kind." Daniel felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest as he helped her to her feet. He signaled to the barista, who immediately rushed over. "Marco, please get the lady whatever she'd like on my tab." The barista's eyes widened slightly. "Of course, Mr. Drake." Bella glanced between them, her expression shifting to confusion. "You have a tab here," Daniel smiled, suddenly uncomfortable with the recognition. Usually, he enjoyed the power his name carried, but for some reason, he didn't want this woman's gratitude to be influenced by his wealth. "I come here often," he said simply. "What were you having?" "Just the soup of the day and a plain bagel," Bella replied, clutching her recovered notebook to her chest. Daniel noticed the fraying edges of her sleeve and the practical, worn messenger bag slung over her shoulder. "Add a sandwich to that order," Daniel instructed Marco. "The turkey avocado." "Oh, that's really not," Bella started to protest. "The soup here is excellent but hardly filling," Daniel said, surprising himself with his persistence. "Please, I'd feel better knowing you had a proper lunch." Bella studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Drake. I'm Bella, by the way, Bella Mitchell." "Daniel," he replied, extending his hand. Her grip was firm despite her petite frame. "Would you care to join me while you wait for your food, unless you have somewhere to be?" Bella checked her watch, a simple timepiece with a cracked leather band. "I have 20 minutes before I need to be back at the library." "You work at the public library?" Daniel asked as he led her to his table by the window. "Yes, in the rare books and restoration department," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. "I spend my days preserving history, one fragile page at a time." Daniel found himself genuinely interested. Most of the people he interacted with daily were either business associates or service staff trained to anticipate his needs. Bella's straightforward manner was refreshingly different. "That sounds fascinating," he said truthfully. "What made you choose that field?" As Bella described her graduate work in conservation science and her passion for preserving historical documents, Daniel found himself drawn to her animated expressions and obvious intelligence. Her lunch arrived, but their conversation continued seamlessly. "I've taken up too much of your time," Bella said suddenly, noticing the clock above the counter. "I really should get back." "Of course," Daniel replied, surprised at his own disappointment. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Bella." She gathered her things, including the remaining half of her sandwich carefully wrapped by the server. "Thank you again for lunch, Daniel. You've restored my faith in random acts of kindness." After she left, Daniel sat for several minutes, his mind unusually distracted from the quarterly reports waiting on his tablet. There was something about Bella Mitchell that intrigued him, her lack of pretense, perhaps, or the passion with which she spoke about her work. Before he could analyze these thoughts further, his phone buzzed with his assistant's name on the display. Reality beckoned. and Daniel Drake returned to his world of million-dollar decisions and boardroom politics. The next morning, Daniel found himself returning to the café at the same time, scanning the room with an interest he didn't care to examine too closely. When Bella didn't appear, he felt a twinge of disappointment that annoyed him with its intensity. He was a 35-year-old billionaire who ran Drake Enterprises, a global real estate and investment firm. He had no business feeling like a teenager hoping for a glimpse of his crush. On the third day, just as he was about to leave, the door opened and Bella walked in, her cheeks flushed from the autumn breeze. She spotted him immediately, and her genuine smile of recognition sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Daniel, hello," she said, approaching his table. Today she wore a simple blue dress under her coat, practical for the cooling weather but flattering to her slender figure. "Fancy seeing you here again." "I'm here most mornings," he admitted. "Would you like to join me?" Bella checked her watch, the same one with the cracked band. "I have a few minutes before my shift. I just stopped in for a tea to go." "Please, let me get it for you," Daniel offered, already signaling to Marco. "You don't need to keep buying me things," Bella protested gently. The lunch was more than enough. "Consider it the price of good conversation," Daniel countered with a smile. "It's surprisingly hard to come by in my circles." Bella studied him curiously as she sat down. "What exactly are your circles, Daniel? I get the feeling you're someone important, but I don't follow business news much." Daniel hesitated, realizing he was enjoying being just Daniel to her, not Daniel Drake the billionaire whose wealth dominated every interaction. "I'm in real estate and investments," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Drake Enterprises, perhaps you've heard of it." Bella's eyes widened slightly. "You're that Drake?" "As in, the Drake Tower and the new waterfront development," Daniel nodded, watching her process this information. To his relief, her expression showed surprise but not the calculating interest he was accustomed to seeing when people discovered his wealth. "Well," she said finally, accepting the tea Marco brought over, "that explains why everyone here treats you like royalty. But it doesn't explain why you're spending your valuable time talking to a librarian who makes less in a year than you probably do in an hour." The blunt assessment startled a laugh out of him. "Perhaps I find your company refreshing. Most people want something from me." "I wanted a lunch," Bella pointed out with a teasing smile. "A lunch I offered," Daniel countered. "And now I'm offering tea, small prices for genuine conversation." Bella's expression softened. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse?" Their 15 minutes stretched to 20 before Bella reluctantly stood to leave. "I really have to go this time. My supervisor is understanding, but I shouldn't push it." "Could I see you again?" Daniel asked impulsively. "Maybe for dinner, without the time constraints." Bella hesitated, and for a moment Daniel thought she would refuse. "I'd like that," she finally said. "But somewhere normal, please. No private rooms or exclusive restaurants where I'd need to Google which fork to use." Daniel laughed. "I think I can manage that tomorrow night." They exchanged numbers, and as Bella left, Daniel realized he was looking forward to their dinner with an eagerness he hadn't felt in years. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant reminding him about his 10 a.m. meeting, and he sighed, returning to the reality of his position. The next evening, Daniel waited outside a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood far from the sleek towers of the financial district. He'd chosen the place carefully, authentic food, casual atmosphere, but still with enough privacy that they wouldn't be disturbed. He'd arrived in his least ostentatious car, a dark blue Audi rather than the usual chauffeured luxury sedan. Bella appeared at exactly 7. Wearing a simple burgundy dress that highlighted the golden flecks in her brown eyes. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, and Daniel felt an immediate attraction that went beyond their previous casual interactions. "You look beautiful," he said honestly. "Thank you," she replied, a blush coloring her cheeks. "You look pretty good yourself." "Less corporate titan, more normal human being." Daniel laughed, realizing he was more relaxed than he'd been in months. That was the goal. "Shall we?" Inside, the owner greeted them warmly, leading them to a corner table adorned with a single candle and a small vase of fresh flowers. As they settled in, Daniel found himself eager to learn more about Bella. "Tell me about your family," he said as they perused the menu. "Are they from here originally?" Bella shook her head. "I grew up in a small town in Oregon. My parents still live there. Dad's a high school science teacher and Mom runs the local bookstore. I'm the only one who left for the big city." "Do you miss it, the small town life?" "Sometimes," she admitted, "especially the sense of community. But I love what I do here and the library's collection is world class. What about you? Were you born into all this?" She gestured vaguely, encompassing what she assumed was his privileged lifestyle. Daniel took a sip of his water. "Not exactly. My father started Drake Enterprises, but it was a much smaller operation than mostly local commercial properties. He built it up over 20 years before I took over." "When did you take the reins?" Bella asked, genuinely curious. 10 years ago, when I was 25, Daniel replied. "My father had a stroke. He recovered but decided to retire. I've expanded the company globally since then." "That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young," Bella observed. Daniel shrugged. "I was groomed for it from childhood. Business school, internships with our partners, shadowing my father from the time I was 16. "And did you want that path?" she asked, her perceptiveness catching him off guard. Daniel paused, realizing no one had asked him that question in years, perhaps ever. "I never really considered alternatives," he admitted. "The company was always presented as my future, and I'm good at it." "Being good at something and loving it aren't always the same," Bella said gently. Their conversation was interrupted by the waiter taking their orders, but Daniel found himself mulling over her observation throughout the appetizer course. He was successful by any measure. Drake Enterprises had tripled in value under his leadership, but when was the last time he had felt genuine passion for his work? As the evening progressed, Daniel found himself sharing things he rarely discussed. His strained relationship with his father despite their business success, his mother's death when he was in college, his growing sense that accumulating more wealth had become an end in itself rather than a means to anything meaningful. "I'm sorry," he said, realizing how much he'd been talking. "This was supposed to be a date, not a therapy session." Bella reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. "I asked because I wanted to know. That's what dates are for, learning about each other." The simple contact sent warmth through him. "You're right, and now I want to learn more about you. What do you do when you're not saving priceless documents from disintegration?" Bella's face lit up as she described her volunteer work teaching literacy to adult learners, her small apartment filled with books and plants, and her weekend hikes in the nearby state parks. Her life was modest by his standards, but clearly rich in purpose and joy. "It sounds fulfilling," Daniel observed as they shared a tiramisu for dessert. "It is," Bella agreed. "Though I won't pretend I don't worry about student loans or rent increases like everyone else." "Would you change anything if money weren't a concern?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious. Bella considered the question seriously. "I'd travel more, visit the great libraries and archives of the world, and I'd probably buy more rare books than my apartment can hold," she laughed. "But honestly, I like my work and my life. More money would just mean fewer worries, not a different path." Her contentment with a life so different from his own fascinated Daniel. As he drove her home later that evening, he found himself reluctant for their time together to end. "I'd like to see you again," he said as he walked her to her door. "I'd like that too," Bella replied, her smile warming him more than the autumn night warranted. Daniel leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Instead, Bella met him halfway, their kiss gentle but lingering, full of promise. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered as she pulled away. "Good night, Bella," he replied, waiting until she was safely inside before returning to his car. Driving home to his penthouse, Daniel realized he felt lighter than he had in years. One dinner with Bella Mitchell had affected him more deeply than any of his carefully calibrated business successes of the past decade. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Bella settled into a relationship that surprised them both with its ease and intensity. They discovered shared interests in history and architecture, spent weekends exploring hidden corners of the city, and gradually learned the rhythms of each other's lives. For Daniel, Bella's world opened up perspectives he'd never considered. He joined her for a literacy program fundraiser and found himself moved by the stories of adults who had overcome shame and fear to learn to read. He browsed second-hand bookstores where Bella was greeted by name and discovered the pleasure of finding unexpected literary treasures. He hiked trails where no one recognized him, breathing fresh air that seemed somehow purer away from the corporate atmosphere he usually inhabited. For Bella, Daniel's influence was equally transformative, though in different ways. He introduced her to gallery openings and symphony performances that had always seemed financially out of reach. He listened with genuine interest as she explained the technical challenges of preserving a 17th-century manuscript, asking questions that showed real engagement rather than polite tolerance. "You know, most men's eyes would glaze over when I start talking about pH-neutral adhesives," Bella remarked one evening as they sat in his penthouse, sharing a bottle of wine after dinner. "Most men haven't seen you light up the way you do when you talk about your work," Daniel replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's captivating," Bella leaned into his touch. "I feel the same when you talk about architecture." "You should have been a designer, not just the money behind the buildings," Daniel stilled. "What makes you say that?" "The way you described the new library wing you're funding," Bella explained. "You weren't talking about square footage or return on investment. You were talking about light and space and how people would feel moving through it. That's an architect's perspective, not a businessman's." Daniel considered her words, realizing she had articulated something he'd never fully acknowledged. "I did consider architecture school," he admitted. "But my father thought business was more practical." "It's not too late, you know," Bella said softly. "You could still pursue that interest, even if just as a hobby." Daniel pulled her closer on the sofa. "How do you do that? See things about me that I've kept hidden even from myself?" "I pay attention," Bella said simply. "It's what you do when you care about someone." The words hung between them, neither quite ready to name the deeper feelings developing beneath their growing connection. Despite their deepening relationship, challenges inevitably arose. Daniel's world of wealth and privilege occasionally clashed with Bella's more modest lifestyle in ways that created tension. The first serious disagreement came 2 months into their relationship, when Daniel tried to surprise Bella with an expensive watch to replace her cracked one. "I can't accept this," Bella said, closing the velvet box without removing the elegant timepiece. "It's beautiful, but it must have cost thousands." "It did," Daniel confirmed, confused by her reaction. "But your current watch is barely functioning, and I thought you'd enjoy having a reliable one." "I don't need a luxury watch, Daniel," Bella replied, her voice tight, "and I'm perfectly capable of buying myself a new one when I'm ready." "I know you're capable," Daniel said, frustration edging into his tone. "It's a gift, not a statement about your financial situation." "But it is," Bella insisted. "A gift should be proportionate to the relationship and respectful of both people's circumstances. How would you feel if I spent my entire month's salary on a gift for you?" Daniel paused, finally seeing the situation from her perspective. "Uncomfortable," he admitted. "I'd worry about your finances." "Exactly," Bella said, her expression softening. "I'm not rejecting your generosity, Daniel. I'm asking for balance." The conversation forced Daniel to reconsider his approach to gift-giving and, more broadly, how his wealth factored into their relationship. It wasn't the last such discussion they would have, but each one deepened their understanding of each other. 4 months into their relationship, a new challenge emerged when a business gossip column published a photo of them leaving a restaurant together, with the headline, "Drake's New Distraction, Billionaire Dates Unknown Librarian." Bella was upset not by the exposure itself, but by the implication that she was merely a passing fancy for Daniel. "Is that how people see me, as your distraction?" she asked, showing him the article on her phone. Daniel took her hands in his. "You know that's not what you are to me," he said firmly. "These tabloids create drama where none exists. It's how they sell advertising. But they'll keep watching us, won't they?" Bella asked, "waiting for you to move on to someone more suitable." more suitable. Daniel repeated, his brow furrowing. What does that mean? Someone from your world, Bella clarified. With family connections and a trust fund and knowledge of which charities are trendy this season. Daniel sighed, pulling her closer. Those women have never interested me, even before I met you, and now that I have you, they couldn't possibly compete. Bella rested her head against his chest. I just worry sometimes that our worlds are too different. That eventually you'll get tired of explaining things to me or introducing me to people who look confused about why I'm there. That won't happen, Daniel promised, and if anyone looks confused about your presence, that's their problem, not ours. He tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. I love you, Bella, not because of or in spite of our differences, but because you make me see the world and myself more clearly. It was the first time either had spoken those words, and Bella's eyes widened. I love you too, she whispered, reaching up to kiss him with an intensity that banished any lingering doubts. As their relationship approached the 6-month mark, Daniel realized he was thinking about a future with Bella in ways he'd never considered with anyone else. The realization crystallized one Sunday afternoon as they walked through a neighborhood park near Bella's apartment. What would you think about moving in together? He asked as they sat on a bench, watching children play on the nearby playground. Bella looked surprised. You mean me moving into your penthouse? Daniel hesitated. Not necessarily. We could find a new place together, something that feels like ours, not just mine that you're joining. Bella studied his face. You'd give up your custom-designed palace in the sky for you. Yes, Daniel said without hesitation. I've been thinking a lot about what really matters to me, and it's not the address or the view or the prestige. It's being with someone who challenges me to be better and reminds me there's more to life than the next acquisition. Bella's expression softened. That's possibly the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Is that a yes? Daniel asked hopefully. It's a let's talk about what that would look like, Bella replied pragmatically. I love you, but moving in together is a big step and we should be clear about expectations. Daniel nodded, admiring her thoughtfulness even as part of him wanted to rush forward. Fair enough. What concerns do you have? Practical ones, mostly, Bella admitted. Would we split expenses proportionally? Would you be okay with my secondhand furniture mixing with your designer pieces? Would you expect me to attend all your business functions? All valid questions, Daniel acknowledged. And I think we can work through them together. The important thing is that we both want to build something together. They spent the rest of their walk discussing logistics and preferences, finding more common ground than differences. By the time they returned to Bella's apartment, they had agreed to start looking for a place that would reflect both their tastes, somewhere central enough for Daniel's commute, but with enough character to satisfy Bella's appreciation for history and craftsmanship. 2 weeks later, they found a converted loft in a historic building that Daniel's company had actually restored 5 years earlier. With exposed brick walls, large windows, and an open floor plan that could accommodate both Bella's bookshelves and Daniel's need for space, it felt like the perfect compromise. I can see us here, Bella said as they stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. So can I, Daniel agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind, making breakfast in that kitchen, reading on rainy weekends, hosting friends for dinner. Bella turned in his arms. You've changed, you know, when we met. I'm not sure you would have pictured domestic scenes so easily. Daniel considered this. You're right, I was focused on achievement, not enjoyment, on accumulating, not experiencing. He kissed her forehead. You showed me what I was missing. And you showed me that I was limiting myself by assuming certain experiences weren't for me, Bella replied. We're good for each other, better together, Daniel agreed, which is why I want to ask you something else. Bella's eyes widened as Daniel reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. Daniel. Bella Mitchell, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Meeting you was the most fortunate accident of my life. Falling in love with you was the wisest decision I've ever made. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? He opened the small box to reveal a ring that perfectly reflected his understanding of Bella, a vintage design with a modest center diamond surrounded by sapphires the color of her favorite dress. Tears filled Bella's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her, pouring all his love and gratitude into the embrace. "You know," Bella said when they finally broke apart, "when you bought me that replacement lunch, I never imagined we'd end up here." Daniel laughed. "Neither did I. It just seemed like the right thing to do at the moment." "The best investments often start that way," Bella teased, "with a simple human connection rather than a calculated strategy." "The best return I've ever received," Daniel agreed, kissing her again. 3 months later, they moved into their new home. 6 months after that, they were married in a ceremony that balanced elegance with intimacy held in the botanical garden, where they'd spent many Sunday afternoons, with a guest list that included both Fortune 500 CEOs and Bella's adult literacy students. As they danced at their reception, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought them together. "You know what I was thinking about this morning?" he asked, holding Bella close as they swayed to the music. She murmured, content in his arms. "That if Marco hadn't overloaded your tray that day, if you hadn't dropped your lunch right in front of me, we might never have met." Bella smiled up at him. "I think about that too sometimes, how one small moment can change everything." "I used to believe success came from careful planning and strategic decisions," Daniel said. "But the best thing that ever happened to me was completely unplanned." "Not completely," Bella corrected gently. "You chose to help me, you chose to ask me to join you. You chose to see me as a person, not just another face in the crowd." "The best choice I ever made," Daniel replied, bending to kiss his wife as their friends and family looked on, celebrating a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into something neither could have imagined that autumn day in a busy café. 1 year later, as they prepared to welcome their first child, Daniel sometimes marveled at how completely his priorities had shifted. He still ran Drake Enterprises, but had reorganized the company structure to allow him more time for family and his newfound passion for architectural preservation. Bella continued her work at the library, now heading the rare books department while consulting on Daniel's historic building restoration projects. Together, they had established a foundation funding literacy programs and library expansions in underserved communities, combining Bella's expertise with Daniel's resources in ways that honored both their values. "You ever regret it?" Bella asked one evening as they sat on the balcony of their loft, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Choosing a life with more complexity and compromise than you had before?" Daniel considered the question seriously, as he always did when Bella asked something important. "Not for a second," he finally said. "Before you, I had success but not fulfillment. I had achievements but not joy." He placed his hand over hers. "You didn't complicate my life, Bella, you completed it." Bella leaned against him, content. "Who would have thought a dropped lunch tray would lead to all this?" Daniel smiled, remembering that first meeting and every moment since. "Sometimes the smallest kindnesses yield the greatest returns," he said, "a lesson this businessman will never forget."